What's up, metalheads? Welcome to another episode of the Talk Louder podcast, where we geek out on all things rock and roll. Hit that subscribe button on our YouTube channel. Leave us your likes and comments. You can also leave likes and comments on our Facebook page. Follow us on iTunes, Spotify, Instagram at talklouder_podcast. And of course, our website, talklouderpodcast.com, where you'll find links to our merch and all of our previous episodes. I'm Metal Dave Glessner, along with my co-host, Jason McMaster. And today we are going deep, man. We are geeking out more than we usually geek out today. I think it's fair to say. We have Jason's former bandmate, guitarist Billy White from Watchtower, is with us today on the Talk Louder podcast. And I know a lot of people have been waiting to have Billy featured on the show. Watchtower still has a pretty widespread underground audience, and we get requests all the time for Watchtower dudes. So, and Billy might be the most private of the bunch. I don't know, but getting him today was kind of a score. And of course, I owe that to my co-host, Jason McMaster. So,
well, you know whose idea it was you know who first brought up having Billy as a guest? Because I know Billy personally, and I know that he is, I wouldn't say he's not a recluse. He's a busy guy.
Yeah.
Just not playing rock star, to just put it in a cartoony sentence, right?
Right.
Jared, our producer, Jared Tootin, brought it up. He was like, hey, you think you get Billy White? You know, just probably because of something related to what you said, that people love Billy.
They do, and they respect him. And
Bob Catlin loves Billy White.
Yeah.
And I love Bob Catlin, therefore I love Billy White.
There you go.
That's not a haiku, but I tried. I don't even know what a haiku is. So listen, I was going to say the things that we got to talk to Billy about today range from sun to Earth's core.
All over the place, and that was kind of the point. And he's the man to do it too, because he's been all over the place. So
yeah, he's not confused one bit. He's constantly growing and super. Let's call him. I'll coin it here. He's a super progressive. Mm-hmm. Musically, spiritually, he's one of the friendliest people ever.
Yeah.
And I think people are going to get to know him. I mean, I could go into the Kiss intro. You wanted the best, you got the best. Billiest White in the world, you know. In this episode, I read passages from, and we didn't really get to talk about this book here. I read some passages from this book called Mean Deviation. Mm-hmm. This is 4 decades of progressive heavy metal. You may recognize the artwork by the wonderful Away, drummer for Voivod.
Yep.
He's on the back as well. You can imagine the bands they talk about in here, but it's all about hard rock and heavy metal that deviates from the norm of, you know, AC/DC or Twisted Sister, you know, just for good old rock and roll.
Right.
Guy Jeff Wagner wrote this. Ron Jarzambek and I were interviewed for this. Mike Portnoy, it's no surprise he's all over this. He might be the first person throughout the first few chapters to first say Watchtower. It might have been the author who mentions Watchtower the first, but throughout this, Watchtower is mentioned, and I wanted to kind of like hold this up as a flag to show Billy that something that he helped create, whether I was involved or not, because I didn't create Watchtower, I helped create where it got taken, right?
Right.
Dude, Billy and Doug and Rick, really, I give all the credit to helping create what Watchtower became. And I wanted to remind Billy, it's like, dude, come on, you know. Yeah. And so I'm attempting to be humble here by sort of like squeezing myself out of the picture a little bit, because this is mine and your show. It's our show. So you know, I might Yeah, throughout this episode, you can, much like now, you can tell how excited I am to just talk and hang out with my friend Billy White.
Yeah, he was great. And, I can vouch for the fact that as a guy who has a lot of friends who are still every bit as enthusiastic about heavy metal as they were when they were 16 years old, I got a lot of friends that point to that album, Energetic Disassembly, and to this day, they hail it as one of the most important records in their collection. If they're musicians, they praise it as one of the most influential albums on their own musical careers or their own musical path or whatever. So amazing that something you guys started as kids has been recognized, and not only by my friends. I mean, that book is living proof. There's a whole book about technical thrash metal, and Watchtower's mentioned throughout it.
It's Bazillion Points Publishing. This thing rules. If you like weird metal, I mean, they talk about Merciful Fate and Voivod, and it gets heavy in here. Heavy, but they're talking about crazy shit in here.
Yeah.
Jeff Wagner, look him up too. He just killed.
I'm aware of the name. Yes.
Yeah. It's a killer book. I'm surprised you don't have it, Dave.
I need to talk to Away. Maybe you can give Away a phone call.
I don't think Away has an extra one.
Anyway, great talk today with Billy White. We cover Watchtower, obviously. We cover his time in Don Dokken's band. We cover all points in between. And we get to know a little bit about where he is today in his life. A really interesting dude. I would say as complex as his music, but also very peaceful. He's an interesting guy. I really enjoyed getting to know him. Billy White today on the Talk Louder podcast.
I wanna just blow your mind immediately.
Yes, please.
What are we looking at?
Tell us, Billy, what are we looking at?
Wow. Let me see if I can remember. I guess I drew that back in high school or something.
You did draw this back in high school. This is on like a canvas board, I think they call that, with probably some kind of Sharpie or rapidograph. And for those of you not watching, it's Rush Neil Peart. It's autographed. You can see Billy's.
Oh, did I sign it? Yeah.
B White right there. Obviously, this is from when you were about 16 years old.
Yeah, I'm amazed you have that. I just recently went through clearing out the house. You remember the house on Fizet? It's sold, and
yeah.
We cleared the whole place out, and there were some old drawings, and most of them I just kind of tossed,
no.
I think I have some things I could send you, Jason, because you appreciate them more than I do. I mean, those are, to me,
well, bit of an archivist, I guess. Bit of a nerd.
Yeah, I don't save things at all. So my mom had kept a lot of things from back in the day.
Yeah,
there's some collectors out there that would be interested in seeing that, I'm sure.
Well, I do have a few things still. Maybe we should talk, Jason, and you give me an address and I can send you things.
Yeah, I've got more than that, but I won't. I'll just throw that one up there.
You don't want to embarrass me.
Yeah, I don't want to embarrass you too much. Then you already will. We will be embarrassing you throughout the program.
I'm fine with that. It's like another lifetime, and I'm having.
Yeah.
When you show something like that, it's like a flashback to a dream.
Yeah.
Right. I'm going to put my glasses on. I usually wear my glasses, but
I like those glasses.
Thank you. I've been trying to. Have you ever seen this? Well, I'm not going to do that. I'm just going to read to you guys for a second. Okay. Story time.
Okay.
Influenced by metal's most ambitious pioneers and various jazz and prog rock artists, bands such as San Diego's Psychotic Waltz, Austin, Texas' Caustic Watchtower, and their German doppelgangers Sieges Even emerged and took the genre into yet more technically demanding areas. Watchtower particularly touched off a movement and sound that focused obsessively on technicality, and their influence spread across the globe and across subgenres like wildfire. Indeed, metal's avant-garde was taking off in a variety of different directions on a global scale.
Wow.
So let me start with that. I have more. This is from a book called Mean Deviation. I'll hold it up. Obviously, Away from Voivod did the art. This came out early 2000s, or I don't know, mid 2000s. After hearing me vomit that garbledy-gook all over you, which actually I'm extremely proud to read, since I was a part of that movement they speak of. I know the answer to this, but to listeners and to Dave, when you were a teenager, did you realize that you were going to be part of something that would change the way you looked at rock and roll?
No, I had no idea. Man, you know how it was. We were just kids having fun and coming up with the wildest stuff we could think of. And, you know, looking back now, it's even hard to remember what the motivation was or what my frame of mind was. But I do know it did feel like we were doing something no one else was doing, at least in the Austin area, you know. And it's hard to put it into context, but when I hear something like that or read something like that, you know, it sounds quite impressive.
Yeah.
Well, and they're not leaving anybody else out. I mean, they're mentioning bands that they're seemingly, I don't want to like put words in anybody's mouth, but they're seemingly pointing at bands that seem to be following what you create. What I'll put myself in there, that we created, that I helped you create. They're pointing at people that sort of came immediately after, like we were the birth of something that they hopped into or were influenced, whatever, but they didn't leave any predecessors out. You know, of course that was just a grab from a page from this book about progressive rock, metal, basically. But they talk about all of the obvious, you know, Priest, Maiden, and, you know, Queensryche and Fate's Warning and Merciful Fate, and of course Metallica and Megadeth, and these bands that had 7-minute songs with 5-10 different riffs in one song. And however they're coming up with, and they're even giving us credit in this book, and I lean towards you, and I want to say you every time I say we, because, and I'll get to that more. They didn't know what to call it. There's a quote at the beginning of this chapter. While I'm talking about it, I might as well just get it out. I like
listening to what you're saying.
Yeah, that's great. I'm trying to not be emotional, because it kind of is. This is in quotes, and it's obviously me. They took this quote from. This is chapter 6 of this book, called "Killed by Tech," is what that chapter is called. Tech metal, quote, was a term we coined on our flyers without feeling like it was going to become some kind of genre, but we had to call it something. We knew it was different, and we didn't want people to think that they were just coming to see a rock and roll band. So we were, quote again, the harvesters of technical thrash metal, Watchtower. And then it says Jason McMaster, Watchtower. Okay. So
good quote.
Thanks. But, you know, when I want to say it was kind of you that started making I mean, Billy, you like started drawing. I mean, I already embarrassed you with your Neil Peart sketch, but you were drawing our earliest flyers from when I remember. And even when I got your phone number off the wall at a music store when I was trying to look for a guitar player for my band Fallen Angel, and then the ball just rolled out of control from there.
Right.
That you had drawn that, and it was like a castle turret with a dragon and watchtower and available for parties. And that's all it said. You were a teenager. You weren't old enough to play in a bar,
Right.
Available for parties. And remember when you could do this? You could just openly give out your home phone number to your mom's house,
Yeah. That's how it started.
But what, and you just said, heavy metal. It was like you just watchtower ... heavy metal. When did that change? Heavy metal wasn't heavy metal anymore. Off of the quote that I just read from this book. When did that change?
I mean, well, to go back a little bit, all the drawings and the visual and conceptual origin, I think I was really into science fiction, and so monster movies, all the Japanese monster movies, and all the trippy sci-fi stuff, and the movie called Heavy Metal. Remember that?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
There was something there where I crossed over from, being a kid into all the sci-fi movies and monster movies into this big sound of, I figured out, okay, you can use a guitar and make this huge wave of sound. I'm seeing a Kiss poster behind you there.
Yeah.
So Kiss Meets the Phantom. I remember, this movie where these guys were like larger than life sci-fi superheroes, and they did it with guitars and hard rock. And then
what was that movie that you used to really like? I think you would go see it like once a year, or maybe it was a midnight movie. I'm gonna get it wrong. Fantastic Planet.
Something. That was
you remember what I'm talking about?
Yeah, did we go see that in midnight movie?
Maybe. Did I get the title right?
Fantastic Planet. I think that's right. It's a French animated film.
That's right. Very strange.
Very strange, very surreal. So I like that kind of surreal psychedelic take. Oh,
Dave, you jump in whenever you want.
No, I was going to kind of go back to a little something that Jason kind of started, and I wanted to ask, obviously when you're, a kid and you're creating the album that became Energetic Disassembly, obviously at that time you're too young to know that this is going to be something that's going to last and people are going to reference it as a milestone album or as an influential album. You don't realize all that when you're a young kid and you're putting this together. But all these years later, I'm sure you've heard it a million times at this point. And it's not just from geeks like me that are walking the street. It's guys from Dream Theater and the guys in Metallica, and they all reference you as, if not as an influence, at least acknowledge you. You have to take a certain amount of either pride or just a certain amount of disbelief in knowing that something you created at such a young age has stood the test of time like that.
I still don't know that I know that, but it is amazing to hear. And it's been so long that I've really listened to any of it or kind of referenced that. So it is strange. It does feel like a different person or a different life.
Yeah, I want to talk about that and where you are with your life now, just spiritually and everything. I want to get to that later. Okay. Yeah,
sure.
Because it's very important. It's very important because there's no limelight, right? You're not in it. Let's talk about while we're talking about drawing and art and things like that, and influences you had as a, can I say child? Because we were children when we were, beating on guitars and microphones in your bedroom in North Austin. When people talk about energetic disassembly, the influential and arguably the pioneer of technical thrash metal, if they're lucky enough to have a pressing of it, they're holding, or just a bootleg or whatever, they're holding your drawing. They're holding a part of your intellectual property, Billy. Those red triangles and the silver technical computer motherboard thing, and that you came up with your own font and that's from your brain through your fingers and hand onto blah.
I did not know that.
That's insane.
Billy's responsible for the album cover?
Yeah, Billy was the resident artist.
Wow. Did not know that. Well, there's another thing, Billy, that goes back to my question. So now,
look at Billy. He looks confused. Like, well, did I draw that? I don't think I drew that.
But that kind of goes.
I do have a memory of that. Yeah.
Yeah.
That kind of goes back to what I was. Yeah, that goes back to what I was saying about, musically you didn't realize what you were creating. But I remember looking through metal magazines and seeing Lars Ulrich wearing a Watchtower T-shirt, and that's your art. You drew that. I mean, that's gotta boggle your mind.
Life boggles my mind. Everything boggles my mind. But that definitely, yeah. It's quite surreal. It is quite surreal. And I'm kind of amazed. And looking back, Jason, I don't want to downplay any of this. No. We did something pretty extraordinary. And we were so driven and so obsessed with that music and that form of expression that, in a certain way, it doesn't surprise me because and I guess anybody at that age, anybody who's starting a band that in that genre or most genres has that kind of driven, obsessive propulsion towards expressing something.
Well, it could have had something to do with emotional, whether we realized it or not, emotional instability, hormonal craziness.
Yeah, we were crazy kids.
Yeah, on top of it, just literally seemed like you got like a body of water and you got a hot wire that's fresh cut, like literally an electric hot wire that's freshly cut open near a body of water, like for a period of
good metaphor.
Well, the other stuff is probably closer to the real, the emotionally lost and you don't even know who we are yet because it's not our fault because we're young. But finding music or this heavy metal, I'd just say, frantic music, this is crazy, right? Fluffy, loud.
It was a lot of adrenaline. I remember the shows and those was it was like riding a tidal wave, of energy.
Yeah. In such a short time too, I feel like it's like a flash.
Yeah,
those years are a flash.
It's interesting. I mean, any band like that, it's a very interesting karmic coming together of different people, and everyone in that band. Those early days of Watchtower had so much ability on their instrument and a certain kind of driven vision. When I think of the early days with Rick, we would be playing and listening to Frank Zappa and King Crimson and all this crazy stuff, and then merging that with the stuff that you and I listened to, all the British new wave of heavy metal bands and everything. It was a very interesting juxtaposition. And
I remember just you, and I don't think it was when we were going to high school together, when we were at Robbins, that you moved over from. Those were good times when you moved over from McCallum to Robbins and got your GED, and you hope that's okay that I mentioned you got your GED.
Actually, I got a diploma.
Oh, you did?
We finished early though, didn't we? Yeah, we got it.
You did. You did. I am not proud of it. A high school dropout, ladies and gentlemen.
Congratulations.
Thank you. Thank you. But yeah, I remember you got in and got out. But I remember during those times, it was probably 83, 84, that you were, and I remember this and I like this, we had discovered both Queensryche and Merciful Fate on the same day.
On the same day.
I've talked about this day on the show before, referencing something else, but probably style. But I bought the first Queensryche EP, like 4 songs or whatever, Lady Wore Black, Queen of the Reich. What are the other songs on there?
Night Rider.
Thank you.
And
glad you guys have memories for these things.
Yeah, I know, right? And then the Merciful Fate EP with the black and white cover, Nuns Have No Fun, Corpse Without a Soul, Devil Eyes, and there's one more. Anyway, the importance of that is I remember I bought both of those and ran home, and I think we had a little get together over there. Remember, we used to on my apartment on Runberg in North Austin. We used to have little get-togethers over there and hangouts, and man, we listened to those records back to back for hours. And I remember that year you were really into that, and I think that it influenced you somehow, because it was like Merciful Fate and even Queensryche were like, they could write these kind of long songs and keep it very interesting and still be Iron Maiden and Judas Priest and Deep Purple all in one band, all in one song. And I think that the songs that we had that early, if I need to give you some titles, Fighters of the End. Remember that song, Billy? We had a song called Tricks of the Trade. There was an instrumental, I think, that you wrote called, this might embarrass you, Malleus Maleficarum.
Oh yeah, that's Latin for something.
Yeah, Hammer of the Gods or something weird. I don't know.
Right.
Anyway, there was a bunch of these early songs, like basically there was a Watchtower album before Energetic Disassembly that was very, I use the term loosely because a lot of people would disagree. What, Watchtower? Those songs were a little more caveman than what we are really known for. And I think that there was things happening in loud, fast, heavy metal music that were coming out that I talk to Matt Janowski every once in a while. Does that name ring a bell? Of course. Yeah. And he was one of the big influencers in Austin for spreading the word of new hard rock and roll, guitar-based rock music. And he was an influence on you and the things you were listening to. And a lot of the bands that Watchtower ended up covering, I think that we found out about from Matt Janowski and his friends and such. Yeah. What do you remember about those days?
Well, that's when we started doing the big outdoor parties, right?
Yeah.
The big down at the lake. I remember these. We would build a stage. We would make pyrotechnics out of coffee cans and gunpowder. And we'd make our own light show, you know. And,
we still have all of our fingers.
Yeah. Wow.
We didn't blow off our fingers.
I know. Some of it was a bit dangerous. Now thinking.
Oh, yeah.
But we do that all night keg parties, right? And then, and that was pretty wild, pretty exciting.
I recall us playing like every song that we could think of in our shows.
Right.
We play like 3.5 hours.
3.5 hour shows. It was just we had limitless energy, I think. You know.
Yeah. And wake up the next day ready for more.
Yeah.
Were you guys was Watchtower ever courted by a major or a bigger record label and then the label just said, I don't even know what we do with these guys, so we're going to pass? Were you so confusing to even the metal labels that there was times when offers were maybe entertained and then didn't kind of bear fruit?
Not that I remember. Jason, do you remember? You would know better than I do.
It's a good.
I'm really impressed by my lack of memory for a lot of those.
That's all right. It's a really good question because
very good. It was Bob, the guy in San Antonio, who had the studio that brought us into the studio there. 85, right? That's when we started recording.
No, earlier than that. In San Antonio it was Bob O'Neill.
Bob O'Neill, sort of signed a record deal, right?
Yeah, it was like a spec deal.
Yeah. And so first time going into the studio, they were recording the Butthole Surfers at the same time. So I remember the Butthole Surfers were making an album in the hours that we weren't in recording, and then sometimes we'd cross over. I remember Gibby and those guys doing some pretty wacky stuff.
Yeah, that's how we ended up. This is one question leads to 1,000 answers, Dave. I'm just
finding that out.
Yeah, it's very. Anyway, the moment that Billy is talking about would have been probably late 83, like summer 83, late summer 80. Yeah. And, the San Antonio Slayer guys were the key and the invite, because me and Billy and Mike Solis we went down to San Antonio and hung out with Ricky Warhite and his friends and Dave McLean and hung out in Bob Catlin's van all day and ate at the very first Taco Cabana and blah, 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 blah. Billy Dave's from San Antonio, so he's going to know the area. Anyway, it was on San Pedro, I believe, Bob O'Neill's sound studio by the zoo. And we were in there recording. We were almost done, and they were still in there mixing a song, but they were releasing a compilation record, Cottage Cheese from the Lips of Death. And they needed one more song. That's a little short. And then I think Rick Shreves, who was the engineer on those sessions, Rick was great, really nice. He was putting up the tapes, and a little bit of Meltdown, the song Meltdown came on, and Paul Leary and Gibby Haynes, as far as I recall, because we're talking 40 years ago now, he's like, hey, what's that? The Buttholes guys were like, what was that? And he goes, oh, it's Watchtower. It's these guys, these kids right here. And da-da-da-da-da. It's like, oh my God, we got to put that on the record. Can we? And it's like, boom, we're on a record. It was literally like that. They just heard, and all this craziness. And they were like, oh, we got to have that. and it's the last record on a punk rock compilation. Caught Us You from the Lips of Death, a hardcore punk rock compilation, a Texas hardcore punk rock compilation or something like that,
featuring the debut of Watchtower.
Yeah, and it kind of changed. It kind of changed things and brought in a lot of new interest.
So I remember doing a lot of shows with some of the punk groups.
Yeah.
ERI and DC.
Yeah, Big Boys.
Big Boys, Offenders.
Yeah, exactly.
Names. That was a lot of fun because it was very exciting. The mosh pits and the stage diving. The shows at the
early crossover, Billy. That's crossover, and that was before
That's I think what we were doing. The hardcore bands. Were the excitement of all of that, just crazy fast, high tempos and everything.
Yeah. Well, energy and angst, and things that hardcore music had in it, we had in it. They had political themes. Some of the lyrics you and Doug Beazer were writing were also politically fueled. So it was actually a great fit.
Some common ground.
Yeah, common ground on subject matter and energy, and whether it be angst or views or just feelings about what was happening globally, lyrically, worked really well. Now, back to your question, Dave, and Billy kind of handing it to me for a second.
I forgot the question.
No, the question was label interest.
Oh, right. Label interest. Yes.
I don't remember if there were labels.
Well, I think that it was, correct me if I'm wrong, anyone in the room, correct me if you know that I'm wrong.
Did we have that kind of ambition to get signed?
That's where I was going. Was it like something that was we were wearing on our sleeve, like, hey, we're good, you should sign us? Hey, were we showcasing for labels? Were we sending demos out to people? The idea of recording a demo we were attracted to. I remember recording our first demo with some of those older titles, and I believe that you and Doug basically kiboshed it, like you didn't like it.
Is that right? I don't remember.
I feel like that.
This is kind of over our for most of my creative life. I usually am not satisfied and always want to move on to the next thing and get better and get better. So there was a drive to always improve and move on to something
that's respectable.
Evolve very quickly, but the downside of that is that sometimes I didn't follow through on certain things. So
yeah, that can happen to perfectionists, can it, Billy?
Yeah, and I don't know that I would say I'm a perfectionist, just kind of there's a certain restlessness or a certain hunger to continuously evolve, and sometimes faster than the audience can keep up with,
Right.
For a lot of
to move on, there wasn't the ambition to be rock stars by way of getting a record deal and moving to Hollywood. Were not anywhere in our.
No. I wasn't suggesting that you guys were.
No, I know that
you were actively seeking it out. But what I'm saying is, it was the album came out in '85, and so by then.
You mean after that? You mean after we had recorded? You mean I thought you meant earlier days?
No. I mean after you recorded. So the album is out. The band is starting to be recognized by your peers. You're certainly making a name for yourself in the underground. Was there ever a point when a label like a Megaforce or a Combat or somebody came to you and said, we're interested, but man, you guys are just too technical, we don't even know what to do with this?
I think you kind of answered it.
Metal Blade or someone like that?
No, Metal Blade. I went out to Metal Blade. There was William Howell. I know you remember William Howell. I would hope that you do. DJ Will is what he goes by now. He was working at Metal Blade, and then he went to Capitol. But the point that I'm really making is I had befriended him, and I would always send him any update we had, but it never. Metal Blade didn't come to the party. It wasn't even really like I was shopping because I didn't know what that meant. We didn't have a lawyer or management really. I guess we did by way of Fred Mitchum.
Yeah.
Who I still
after that, and we created a label, Zombo Records.
That's right. And that helped. He helped things get or seem to be a little bit more legit by him saying, well, let's make a record and put it on our own little label, and we'll just use our own money, and we'll like perception is everything right now when you're DIY, and let's make our own party and people will show up, and he was right, and they did, and it was great. But again, Dave, I don't think that there was ever any real interest until late in the game, after, like, it would have been 87, like right after Billy White left the band.
Yeah. Let me turn the question inward then.
Good.
So did you guys ever in rehearsal, look at each other and go, dude, that's even too weird for us. That time signature, dude, it's just too crazy.
I don't think we did. I think we
you just ran with everything, right?
Well, sometimes it was kind of like an inside joke. I think that one thing that there was a lot of inside humor, and we were trying to make each other laugh sometimes with how wild. It was very fun to do really complex music that I think was hard for even us to really grab a hold of, but we kept pushing the boundary a little bit further and further. And we had really developed something by playing together, where we almost had a certain telepathy. Now thinking back, I kind of wonder, how did we actually write that stuff?
May I?
Sure. Maybe you have some insight.
No, I like what you were saying about you guys. I just picture you, Rick, and Doug together, whether I'm just a fly on the wall or right outside the door or in whatever, or just standing in the room with my jaw open, and like Doug going, okay, now 6, and you play the same little movement. Okay, now let's do 3, right?
Okay, here's what I remember.
Okay, 13, and you guys would change the math on a part you would play over and over and over every time, and then you guys would fall out laughing, and I'd be standing there going, what in the hell are you guys doing?
We actually got the phone book, and we would just go through phone numbers. There used to be this thing called the phone book, a big, thick book, pages of phone numbers. And so we'd go through phone numbers and make musical parts based on just random phone numbers, and it was some kind of a cerebral exercise that was very satisfying at that time,
So hold on a second, Billy, just hold your horses for a second. So Dave,
are we talking about time signatures?
Yes. Are you finally starting to see what I was involved in and dealing with?
I'm so sorry.
This is some sort of like sorcery that was new to me. The headbanger, I'm wearing a Twisted Sister shirt, and these guys are speaking witchcraft.
Right. So I want to get this straight. You're looking through the phone book and just pulling random phone numbers and then creating time signatures out of those numbers? Is that what I'm hearing?
Time signature and scalar patterns, and who took it a step further and really blew my mind was Ronnie, who took my place in Watchtower. He's a wizard of mathematical musical equations. But it was kind of for me for a while, really exciting, and Doug and Rick as well. Very exciting to take random numerical kind of codes and make music out of it. Now I don't remember as well how we were doing it. It was a little bit some sort of new language we were creating,
Thank you.
Yeah, I guess that's a good way to say it. We were really trying to write a new language, a new musical language. Not that, I mean, there are people like Zappa, Frank Zappa, who are, was a genius in that realm. And other people, who else in that world, certain other progressive rock or jazz artists.
Yeah, it's probably nothing new to some people who play music like that.
Right. But in the context of heavy metal, it was relatively new anyway. I mean, you had your Rush and Yes and, bands like that. But in the context of thrashing heavy metal, the Watchtower was kind of relatively new. That sound was kind of new, right?
Well, and we were in 11th grade.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
We're just kids. And we were, a lot of it was really funny and exciting. We had we laughed so much. That's one of the things when I think back, is how much we liked to laugh and just make ridiculous jokes about everything. And we considered ourselves really kind of anarchists, like against everything. We were kind of anti everything, and we were going to really prove that we were, we could do things no one else could do.
I feel like that is what was kind of a secret energy behind what, and not to discredit myself or Rick, especially Rick, because no one plays like Rick Kolaluka. In all my years, I've never, I mean, like Bobby Jarzambek and Dave McClain are Texas, drummer gods that we have so much respect for. They both would agree that no one plays like Rick, but not to look back to what I was saying, not to discredit other members, but you and Doug Keyser, I feel like were these two sort of Lex Luthors, or sort of villainous. It's us. We're gonna take over. We're gonna do it our way, and nobody, and this sort of like, I almost said passive aggressive kind of like, I'm not really, but a way of changing the musical landscape. And I feel like you guys did it and influenced the world. I mean, we could kind of spin our wheels and talk about this forever. Do you remember that quote that was on the back of our first real t-shirt? Remember those white shirts with the Fallout Shelter in black on the front with the old squirrely logo, and on the back it said, "We're forming an alliance to overthrow and annihilate the presence." Wait. We are forming an alliance to overthrow and annihilate the presence of songs that lack integrity and music produced the sole purpose of material reward.
Wow.
Oh yeah.
I can't believe I remembered that.
Mouthful, yeah.
I can't believe I remembered that. That is from the mind of this gentleman right here.
You are amazing. Yeah, we thought we were very important. We were trying to be very important,
We were young and dumb. Little did we know we were young and dumb, right?
Do you ever know when you're young and self-important and trying to make a bold statement? I think we've all done that. And in fact, it's funny to go back to all of this, because I think most people probably have memories of their high school years and making some bold statement where they thought they were really profound or prophetic.
Yeah.
There was, and it's kind of hilarious now to look back. But you have to have compassion for these young characters and their self-importance and their, and then to certain people who listen to the album and still think it's a kind of a milestone. Something transmits, and there's something shared and something universal, and it's hard to know.
Yeah.
But that
really weren't thinking about it. We were just going for it.
But that sort of angered sounding statement that's literally printed out in that paragraph on the back of an effing t-shirt.
Yeah.
I mean,
what does it mean? I guess,
you're not holding anything back, but it goes with your anti everything, right?
We were very anti, commercial pop music at that time. We wanted to, we were anti everything. And growing up in Austin and being surrounded by a lot of roots music and blues music, we wanted to really stand out and make a statement.
I think we were a little mad that maybe I felt like, I'll speak for myself, but I know it went around the room.
Yeah.
That the local entertainment scene, if you will, was not recognizing any punk rock or heavy metal or anything that we thought was viable or worthy of some attention. Even though I will add that all of the bands that fit under the umbrella I just described were doing pretty damn good. I mean, all of the punk scene was healthy in Austin. It was healthy. Yeah.
Did you guys ever consider relocating to San Antonio? Because San Antonio, as you know, was known as a heavy metal stronghold, and there was a scene there, and you guys were peers with a lot of those bands. Was there any thought to, hey, let's go to San Antonio? They have shows and there's other bands we can pair up with? Or
well, I didn't drop out until 84, Dave. So, I didn't want to change my high school. My parents wouldn't let me change my high school.
So you just stopped having one, right?
Yeah, we still lived at home, right? Well, until Jason, you were the first to get your own new place on Runberg, huh?
Yeah, my mom moved out. I got myself another place. You just start paying the rent here. Okay. Well, that was a way to learn something, wasn't it?
Yeah.
So Billy, what ultimately led to you leaving Watchtower?
Good question.
Yeah, that's a good question. And Jason, I was thinking back, getting ready to have this conversation. I was memory, and I remember sitting in the car out of the house. It was Doug's house in South Austin, right, where we were rehearsing in those days. And we had a long sat in the car for.
Doug and Rick lived on Rock Ridge or something like that. Is the name of that street. Yeah, South Austin.
So I think it was really that I just wanted to play other kinds of music. I wanted to do simpler music and play funk. There was some, I think even at that time, there were some other bands that I had recorded with or was considering recording with. And I don't know, I was kind of burnt on playing such complex music, and I wanted to play something a lot simpler. And
let me ask you this real quick, and then you can continue. Were you all of 19 or so?
Was I 19? I think maybe 18.
Yeah, I mean, I'm just asking. Do you recall? Well, it would have been in '86. How old were you in '86? 20?
Oh,
86.
It seems like I was younger than 20.
19. That was my guess. 19. So
yeah. Okay, that sounds about right. And so there were some other bands that I was interested in playing with. I was listening to so many kinds of music that I didn't really want to just be, play heavy metal or even distorted electric guitar. I wanted to play funk. I wanted to play blues. I wanted to get into playing jazzy stuff, and go into the studio, record with other people. I'm trying to remember now, but it just suddenly one day it's like I woke up and I was like, I don't want to play this kind of music anymore.
I feel like you might have been being, I don't think courted is the right thing. Right. I mean, I don't know. Were you being asked for other people to, hey, come lay some tracks down over here? And, that was happening, wasn't it?
Yeah, and I'm trying to put it together in the timeline. I mean, very quickly after I left Watchtower, I remember that we went to San Francisco.
Yeah, that's October 5th and 6th of 1986.
1986. Okay, that was the last show, right? In San Francisco. So we did that in a van all the way out to, and I felt really kind of bad for leaving. Like I was letting everyone down. And I remember feeling really kind of like an outsider. Particularly, it seemed Rick and Doug were kind of angry that I was leaving. But
maybe I just think that you guys being so close had more to do with it than them losing guitar player. I think that it, in deep-seated unconscious, they're losing my friend. This is my friend. I'm losing my friend. He's not going to be on my team anymore.
Yeah, it was a little like a family up or something, and so maybe it was my own feeling about it. I just felt a little bit on the outside. I mean,
some of it could have been on you. I know that I was trying to be as sort of peacemaker, neutral, not angered, definitely not happy, but not mad at anyone or anything, especially you, for wanting to grow. That's how I choose to remember it. So
the feeling of letting everyone down, and so I remember agreeing that we had that one show there, so going to do that, and then it was pretty soon after that I went into the studio with a few different people who were making records, and got to play with a lot of really interesting musicians.
Will Sexton comes
so Will Sexton, before that even I joined Dino Lee's band. That was like a James Brown Vegas review. That was a blast. And,
I think they're doing. I'm going to interrupt you because our listeners know to go look for it. Dino Lee's White Trash review might have gone under Dino's Love Johnson. There's probably a couple of different things you can go look on YouTube, and you can see a very young Billy White.
Oh, really?
Yeah, there's video. Yeah.
Oh.
Did they make you wear some costumes, or did you just kind of dress kind of rocker stuff?
No, we wore all kinds of wacky costumes,
That's right.
It was a total freak show, and it was really fun.
Is it true that Bobby Landgraf sort of got you into that? Tell us how that happened.
Bobby also played, and I think it may have been through him. I'm having a hard time remembering that, but at one point we were both playing, which was really a blast. And the rhythm section was amazing. He had picked all the best players from around Austin, some of the very best. And it was a huge band, like 10 people on stage, a full horn section. And the shows were so wild. So
wasn't Margaret Moser from the Chronicle, was she singing backup for a little bit?
I did, yeah. And so that we did that for a while, and we made a record that got released in Europe. And then around the same time, Will Sexton, his band, he had just signed with MCA Records. So David Grissom, an incredible guitarist in Austin, who a lot of people might know, had made a record with Will, but then he was touring with Joe Ely. So Will was about to go on the road, needed a guitarist. And I went to record one song for that album that came out on MCA. And then we went on the road for several months with a big budget, you know, so we had a nice bus, nice hotels. First tour, you know, at that level of a certain amount of comfort. It was nice to have a bus and everything. And so
you're on a roll. What do you think? So you come back from that. Did the Will? It was Will and the Kill was under the Montana.
Yeah. And then that band, he went on to get some other members and kind of fired that whole band and started a new incarnation of that. And then I played with several other people, made some different records. A guy named Jay Aaron in Austin. I joined his band for some time, and then it was around '89. So this is a funny story. A lot of people talk about. Sometime around that, I had made cassettes of myself playing, you know, guitar, just kind of instrumental shredding type stuff.
If you squint, you might be able to see those on the shelf behind me.
Oh gosh, you have one of those.
Pretty sure I have a couple of them. Yeah.
Well, I put my phone number, you know, it was my parents' number. And I gave those out to whoever I thought might be interested.
452-5668.
Yeah. I don't think that.
That's it, isn't it? That's the phone number. Isn't it? Yeah.
Yeah. Please don't anyone try calling that number. I have no idea what.
No, we don't live there anymore. So
what came out of that?
So this one tape that I ended up giving to the guitar tech of Warren DeMartini of Rat, that tape miraculously found its way to Don Dokken's hands, who popped it into a tape player as a cassette and was listening to it going, wow, I need to call this kid who's playing guitar on here. And calls my parents' house. I wasn't living there anymore, but they got through to me, and suddenly I'm talking to this guy who won't tell me who he is at first, who says he has a band in LA, a band that's quite well known, that's breaking up, and he's going to start a new project. He said, I'd like to fly you to LA to write some music. And I'm thinking, wow, who is this? By the end of that,
that's surreal. That's surreal that some guy, hi, you don't know me, but I want to fly you to LA.
Yeah.
That's bizarre. I want to go back another thing and just sort of have fun with this. Okay. So I know who you're talking about, right? But this person, I'll just say it, it's Don Dokken. So Don Dokken is talking to your mom. Hi, it's Don Dokken. Is this Billy's mom? Hey, what's up? I know Bill. Okay, so Billy doesn't live there anymore. So I'm just trying to fathom your mom talking to Don Dokken. It's just surreal. It's like, what? It doesn't make sense.
Your mom talked to James Hetfield, right?
No.
So
no, she didn't. James left a voicemail on my mom's answering machine. The one that had the little micro cassettes. Yeah, that's.
So Don Dokken calls you, and he's not letting you know who he is. So pick up the story from there. He's telling you that he's a well-known guy starting a new project. Where does it go from there?
Well, he said he couldn't tell me because his band is they're touring on the Monsters of Rock tour, I guess it was. And it's funny because I'd been watching MTV, watching them, you know, and I really liked George Lynch's guitar playing, and I thought, oh, that'd be a cool band. You know, I'd love to be playing that kind of stuff in that kind of a band. And I liked Warren DeMartini of Rat a lot as well. So, you know, the thing was, and this is where I moved on from the Watchtower thing, I just kind of wanted more straight ahead, more melodic kind of playing.
Well, after playing random phone numbers.
Yeah. There was something about it that I was drawn to. And so Don is talking to me on the phone, and I'm thinking, well, yeah, I guess we could talk further, or, when do you want me to come to LA? And then he finally, at the end, he says, okay, you can't tell anyone, but this is Don Dokken. I said, oh, wow, yeah. Hey, I've been watching you on MTV, man. Yeah, sure, I'll come to LA. I'd love to get together. And he said, I want to write some songs and kind of do an audition. And so I was the first person he contacted for his new project. So then I flew out there a couple times. We went in the studio, wrote some stuff together. I was having a very strange thing at that time, though. I had some kind of carpal tunnel or something in my left hand. So I was a little bit impaired, and my guitar playing was suffering. And I think also at the time I was just a bit nervous of going out there and really wanting to make a good impression. And so I had some tension in my hand. And the first time out there didn't go as well as I had hoped. But we wrote some interesting stuff. And so he wanted me to come back out again. And I was having some treatments on my arm for a type of carpal tunnel or something that was hindering my left hand movement.
I remember even when you were still in Watchtower, which would have been like maybe the last year in the group, you were into Tiger Balm.
Yeah.
You were using salve, and I don't know. I think you were using holistic stuff. So
yeah, there was some kind of a strained tendons or tendonitis. I had some kind of tendonitis in the left hand. So I had to deal with that. But then he wanted me to come out again. And, the next thing I knew, he was putting the rest of the band together. He had John Norum coming from Sweden. John Norway, actually, but, he was in the band Europe.
Yeah.
Quite well known. And, when he came out, we started playing together, and it worked well,
Awesome.
A two guitar, we could do harmonies and things. We did this kind of two guitar approach. And then Mickey, we had gone through several drummers and bass players, trying to find the right match. We even started recording the album with other drummers, bass players. Wow. But John and I were early on the two guitar formation of that band.
Do you remember the first time you met Mickey D? This is kind of a pop quiz, Bill.
Oh man.
Do you remember the first time? Well, maybe you didn't meet him. Remember that? So let me just intervene. So Watchtower, you and I, we opened for King Diamond at the Ritz in 1986.
Oh, yes. Mickey was playing drums.
Yeah, Mickey D was on drums in King Diamond's Fatal Portrait album touring. Well, Mickey was on a bunch of those King Diamond records, but the point is we were in the room with Mickey D before he was a household name.
Okay. Right.
And so fast forward to, through the end of 86 and all through 87, I'm going to not correct you, but make sure you realize it's 88 that you're getting these calls from Don, and that you were going in and out of LA.
Man, time is so strange. The timeline is, it's kind of a blur, and a lot of things happening very quickly.
You know what's interesting? This is piggybacking exactly that from the time that you and I met, which would have been in May of 1982. To let's just say May of, let's just call it 88. That's not very long.
It's not very long. It's a flash, in fact, a flash.
Yeah.
So when you're in Don Dokken's band, you were talking earlier about, you had a tour previous to Dokken that you had a bus and there was a certain upgrade in comfort levels, if you will. So when you're out with Dokken, I imagine that's probably, tour buses and hotels every third day or something like that. And, probably living fairly large at the time and playing to crowds that, Don's got a built-in audience. So did you like that lifestyle or were there things about it that was kind of like awkward and uncomfortable for you?
Oh, that's an interesting question. I mean, what I can say is that, yes, it's very exciting. It felt like stepping into, a rock star fantasy. And there was a lot of expectation also, I think. I felt, having to step up to fill some big shoes. George Lynch was quite an incredible guitarist,
Right.
Is an incredible guitarist.
Yeah.
And
by the way, let's don't leave out Peter Baltes on bass.
So when Peter came on, so if I go back to meeting Mickey and Peter, what I can remember is it was really in the studio that we're in the process of making that album. We had different people filling in as the rhythm section. And when Mickey came on board and then when Peter came on board, that rhythm section was ridiculous. I mean, they were like an unstoppable tank, I mean, it was very powerful. And so playing live, that band was pretty incredible.
Yeah.
And Peter, man, what a solid, unstoppable force of a band. And good guys. All these guys, we got along great. We became kind of a family. But it was interesting because it was promoted in this way. It's sort of an international band, right? Peter from Germany, Mickey from Sweden, John from Norway. And then they made me out to be the Texas kid.
Yeah.
And I was the youngest of everyone, And I did feel kind of like a kid who was new to this level of notoriety. All those guys had been in quite well-known bands.
So I don't know if it was while you were making the record or out or in Los Angeles area still writing songs, but in the meantime, your homeboy was busy, and I was living in Burbank, and and somebody, my homie was up to no good and wouldn't tell me why he was coming to Los Angeles, talking about you needing a place to crash. Do you remember crashing on me and Scotty's sofa for a few nights at the Oakwoods in Burbank?
I remember coming to visit you, but did I crash there? I don't remember that.
I think you crashed there a couple nights.
Huh? Why would that? And I didn't tell you.
Were you staying? No, you couldn't. You swore me to secrecy, or you were sworn to secrecy. You couldn't tell me and Scott who you were. You wouldn't tell me who you were either writing or recording with. I don't remember. It would have been like late '88. It would have been like November, because we were in the studio with Max Norman.
If I stayed, and I remember hanging out. I don't remember crashing with you guys, but if I did, it was just because I wanted to hang out.
Yeah. You may have only stayed one night. I seem to remember, or like to remember it, that you hung out for a couple of days.
I was homeless.
You were kind of coming and going, though. It wasn't like you didn't have a place to go. Maybe you just wanted to hang out for a night or something.
Yeah, that was fun.
But you wouldn't tell me and Scott who you were jamming with.
Oh man, I'm sorry.
I don't care.
Kept it a secret.
Added to the intrigue. I was like,
yeah. Whoa. So for the record, you ended up on the Don Dokken album, Up From the Ashes. And that record came out on Geffen Records. And, that's a major label. So you mentioned earlier that there was heightened expectations when you're at that level. And I would imagine if you're signed to Geffen Records, a guy coming from Watchtower who's now on Geffen Records and playing with a guy who's already got an audience, what are some of the expectations that you're talking about? And what are some of the downsides of being at that level? I mean, I can guess, but I want to hear it from the guy who lived it.
Well, these are good questions. Well, I wanted to establish myself as a guitarist in that style and that realm, you know, and get something and play something that was unique. I put a lot into that record, and I wrote the majority of the music, all the riffs and everything. You know, Don and I wrote most of that album. John came on board, wrote a few of the songs, but it was really Don and I. Don himself kind of would mention that, you know, a lot of people are going to be expecting, you know, a lot from whatever record we put out. I think he felt the pressure of, you know, there was a little bit of a rivalry between him and George. Mm-hmm. So I was aware of that. And for a little while, you know, it felt a little bit like a weight to bear, but then after a while, I didn't care as much, you know, and I was confident that we had some good songs. You know, John Norm was known as this great guitarist, which he really was. And so people thought that he was the lead guitarist, but we really split it kind of half and half. And I think maybe I may have done even more of the lead guitar on the album overall. But, you know, since I was kind of unknown to that audience, I felt a little bit of wanting to make a statement or prove something, you know. Yeah. And you had asked earlier about that lifestyle, stepping into that lifestyle. It was a wild roller coaster ride and very exciting. And it was at that time that I started feeling a little bit of a certain restlessness or disillusionment with that kind of life. And even seeds were already there. And this is kind of the theme maybe of my musical career. The seeds of already moving on, in a sense, had started, and wanting to leave the world of playing music, you know, and I don't know, the excess of that life and that world left me with a sort of an empty feeling, you know, at times.
So let's move on, because I feel like we've kind of covered all that, and the successes and how you were feeling about that are great. You've made great points.
I wanted to ask one last question, because that lineup, then it wasn't just Billy that left Don Dokken. That whole lineup was gone after that record.
Yeah, that's right.
That's right. Yeah. So why did that ultimately end? And then we'll move on.
Okay.
Yeah, you know, that record came out at a time when I think that style of music was really not in fashion anymore. I remember Nirvana's album coming out, and it seemed like it just shifted the whole musical landscape. I thought that was a great record, and I found it really refreshing. But I think Don had also gotten burned a little bit by the record company changing hands. When that record came out, I think the Geffen was sold to MCA, or there was some huge upheaval in the music business, so it didn't get the push that it really needed or deserved. And I think he was disillusioned by the whole thing, because this was his big jump to his solo album and, you know, really making something on his own.
Yeah.
So that the whole thing just felt like it lost steam. Yeah. And then I came back from the road. The highlight of that whole experience was going to Japan, and really wonderful playing Japan and the fans there and everything. It was very special. And then we came back from that. Everybody was kind of exhausted from touring and some disappointments on how the record was doing. There was a lot of expectation, as I was saying. And I think Don kind of went into just a little bit of a rethinking the whole thing. And we all sat around and idled for a little while, and then he was starting to work on a next record, but it just wasn't clicking. So we all kind of went.
I want to move around a little bit.
Yeah, go ahead. I just wanted to put a period on the end of that
here, but yeah.
Okay.
You know, you came back to Austin at I don't want to say fairly quickly, but at some point you came home.
Yeah.
And
it was 92.
Okay, and you wrote a couple of you had a couple of different bands that played around here. You had you were playing with your brothers, you were playing with Steve Bernal, you were playing with
JJ Johnson.
You had easily, I'll say, without issue, like just, hey, you want to come sing and you want to come play, you want to, you just had friends that would show up and help you put together some music, whether it be 6 is 9, which is a project that you had, or the Billy White Trio. And I feel like you really, when I listen to those records, I feel like it is a coming home. You were singing. A lot of people didn't know that you could do that, Billy. You were fronting your own world after this sort of like crazy thing from, like, I'll just say, from you're a young lad playing guitar from like 80, 81, just zippity doo-dah all the way to like 92, like just over a decade, and you're finally home doing your own deal, and there's no suppressing anything anymore. Now you have this sort of like hoverboard for you to like let people sort of see who you are lyrically and musically. And I love those records and what you did with family members, with people that you respect, people, longtime people. Young, JJ was young. I remember JJ from San Antonio coming to see Watchtower play in like 85, and he's like 16.
JJ went to the same high school as I did.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Yeah. I just JJ a couple weeks ago.
Nice.
Really good to catch up with him.
Nice.
He really had a way of playing together. Like, I think I haven't really had with anyone. He and I really had a connection and a telepathy. And how
that's not a surprise to me at all.
Yeah, when we first started playing, it was just like, oh, this is the drummer I've always been looking for. You just knew right away. We knew where we were going. Like on the stop of a dime, we could shift into something else.
Is he still with John? Is he still playing with John Mayer?
Oh no, he's that was a long time ago. He was playing with Tedeschi Trucks.
Oh, right.
Gary Clark Jr.
Yeah, that's right. But going back to Jason's question, the Billy White Trio, or anything, when you come back to Austin, you now have a new level of creative freedom that's yours to explore. What did you what kind of adjustment was that for you after with Geffen and Don Dokken? There's probably boundaries. But now you can do whatever you want, right? And so where was your head? What were you trying to say musically at that time?
At that time, I mean, I was listening to so many different things, and I was interested in vocal harmonies. I remember wanting to do something where we could do vocal harmonies, and I formed this band 6 is 9 with Mike Moyer, a really great singer, and we did he was the lead singer, but we would do a lot of dual harmonies vocally, and that was really satisfying. And musically, anything was possible. And we had Steve Bernal playing bass, a really wonderful drummer, Raphael Gale, who has played with a lot of people. He was in Leonard Cohen's band for the last several years.
Wow.
And so that band 6 is 9 was was really something. And we almost signed a major deal. So, we were doing the South by Southwest conferences and released a couple of demos. But then I wanted to be the lead singer at that point and really just step out there and really give it a go. I felt like I had to, and that was a big leap to be the front man and the lead singer. And at that time, I was influenced by a lot of things like Jeff Buckley, Chris Whitley. I was listening to some very interesting singer guitarists who were stretching the boundaries, and they were a big influence. And I wasn't, as interested in being a guitarist just for guitar's sake. Really wanted to be about songwriting, finding new ways of playing the guitar, but chordally. So some of the Billy White Trio stuff has some very interesting chordal structure and even altered tunings and things. I was listening to Soundgarden and a lot of bands like that. And so Billy White Trio was really, as far as rock and heavy music, that was the most complete expression that I found, I really, because there was no limit to what we could do. Right. With JJ, Steve on bass, later on Brian Walsh, who was in Soul Hat. That band was just an amazing group of musicians. I felt like we could stretch out and go anywhere, in a different way than Watchtower did.
Yeah, I was going to say, you had already been to the other end. You'd already been to the other end of the spectrum. You'd already stood on top of the sun and handled it, and now you were ready to just go to the other side and see what it was like because you could.
Well, I think that one difference is that the Billy White Trio, is heavily groove oriented, whereas Watchtower really wasn't much about what you would call groove, really.
Yeah, wasn't 4 on the floor.
No. And that's a different expression of groove or rhythm.
I wanna read something again if you don't mind.
Yeah.
Because we're in a good place to start talking about where you are and what is actually in the mind of Billy White over the past.
You guys really have good questions.
Well, I got to give a lot of credit to Dave because he's the only journalist. He's the only journalist in the room.
Big questions. I'm trying to.
There's this article, Billy. You probably don't read Decibel magazine. Decibel magazine is this heavy metal magazine that I adore. I think it's one of the best magazines out there. The writers are incredible because they're fans. I want to read you something that came out about 6 years ago in Decibel magazine. Listen to this. Imagine your 17-year-old Watchtower brain, and we're in your bedroom under your Iron Maiden poster, and you're playing the solo for, Black Star by Yngwie Malmsteen, and I'm going, wow, that was cool. Play it again. Okay. Fast forward to this. This is in Decibel magazine. Thank you, Decibel magazine. This article is called "The Top 5 Most Outrageous Watchtower Moments Ever."
I love the opening paragraph. You got to read the opening paragraph.
That's what I'm reading.
Okay.
All of us at Decibel are highly popular human beings, which means we've never spent Friday nights sitting around inside listening to and analyzing Watchtower songs. Just kidding. We've totally done that, and those have been some of the best Friday nights of our lives. I'm not done. To celebrate the recent release, and this is great, and I'm sure, Billy, you haven't heard this, but they really did a bang-up job, the guys in Watchtower, with Alan Tecchio on vocals on the last record they put out, which would have been that year in 2016, I believe, called Concepts of Math, Book 1. This is, they say, to celebrate the recent release of the technical progressive thrash band's new EP at the time, 2016, Concepts of Math, Book 1, quote, parentheses, have we mentioned we love Watchtower yet? In parentheses. We thought the time would be right to look back at 5 times Watchtower absolutely, without question, completely blew our minds. So here we have it, the 5 most outrageous Watchtower moments ever. Now, again, do you believe that you helped create, are a founding member of the craziness that is that?
No.
In your, that's what I thought. So they, just to go on, they mentioned The Fall of Reason as number 5, Asylum as number 4 from the first album. And then the third one, mind-blowing moment of Watchtower in Watchtower history is Mayday in Kiev. Number 2 is Violent Change, the opening track on Energetic Disassembly, written by a person who's sitting at this campfire right now, along with Asylum. And then the number one mind-blowing Watchtower moment, according to this article, was Instruments of Random Murder. We're talking about shit Billy White and Doug Keezer wrote when they were teenagers, okay? This is in my favorite magazine, came out only 6 years ago. Can I read the... Please, can I read the Asylum one?
Okay.
Can I read it? Because it just makes me giddy.
Yeah.
Okay, vocal lines from the Asylum. That's what they call this little ditty. It says, there's something about that vocal pattern from 0.59 to 1.11. That's the clock on the counter in the song of Asylum, the second song off of the band's debut, Energetic Disassembly. That is just mind-boggling. It's slightly fingers on chalkboard, but it's also just slightly the best thing I've ever heard in my life. Vocalist Jason McMaster. What?
Like a fine wine. And that's your vocal, Jason, your vocal. Like a fine wine.
I'm going to comment. Give me a second. It's slightly fingers on the chalkboard, but it's also just slightly the best thing I've ever heard in my life. Vocalist Jason McMaster absolutely going for it, channeling his inner King Diamond, then ramping up to that whole new level. I'm pretty convinced that the reason there's a break in the vocals halfway through that 12-second run is because McMaster goes to levels only dogs can detect. His vocal line directly follows Billy White's insane, quote, guitar riff.
Insane.
All of which leads the listener on a frantic technical thrash race to the next psychotic part in this awesome song. Now, you said, Jason, that's your vocal, but they corrected you, didn't they? And I was going to correct you, that it's your guitar that I'm harmonizing with.
Oh,
when you guys, that's your guitar riff, and I decided in the studio, oh, what if I sang a harmony to that?
Brilliant.
You're influencing my, right? I'm sure that you played the harmony too, but when I sang on top of the third or whatever, the fifth or whatever that was. Yeah. So thank you, Billy White.
Thank you, Jason.
For getting my name in Decibel magazine.
Well, I think this goes back to something I was saying at the top of the show. You guys created something. You didn't know it at the time, but here's Decibel magazine as recently as 6 years ago, totally nerding out to the point that, I mean, these guys actually know what they're talking about. You can tell they are hardcore fans who have studied those songs. So all these years later, there are people out there that still devour this stuff, and I think that's incredible.
I think they know it much better than I know it.
Well, and there's something real about that, because I think we kind of started this conversation with, like, it's a lifetime ago. It's like, could it be that it's just part of who you really are that's sort of on a shelf back here. Oh yeah, well, I can't get rid of it because it's a part of my life. But let's talk about where you are right now, Billy. Let's talk about what sort of gradually caused you to transcend, I think I'm using good words, to go into what you're into now with your healing and your beliefs and where you are now, because I think that I just want to give you the floor so you can talk about it.
Well, I had a couple coherent ideas, and now they seem cluttered away. And what I want to say is that we've all had many lives, I think, in this one life, right? We've all
Sure, man.
As many characters. We've all worn many outfits. I think
can say that again. Do you remember the crap you used to wear on stage? Holy man, what the hell were we wearing?
We don't have to.
Yeah. Well, we have pictures to embarrass ourselves. So.
Yeah, but we've all worn many costumes. We've all worn many masks. I feel more than probably most people because I have many friends from the old days that I may have lost touch with, and it's surprising to me now how many changes, how many transformations it feels that I've gone through. And there was a turning point, and it was at the end of the Billy White Trio, the years of that band. I put a couple of albums out and gone to Europe and toured. And I came off the road really burnt out and wanting to just quit playing music.
What about, real quick, Alejandro Escovedo? Didn't you go to Europe with Alejandro?
That was later. That's actually not so long ago. That's about 10. In fact, that's so. This is what I'm talking about now. Is probably the year 97, 98.
Okay. Wow.
Coming back from Europe and being kind of burnt on just playing loud music and playing music in general. I didn't feel like I could quite express something that I was reaching for. And this is throughout, all of my time as a musician. I think I was always reaching for something untouchable in a way. So I came back from that tour. And so I also, throughout all these years, all of the 90s, I had been leaving tours and going into retreats, into silent retreats, mostly in a Zen center, starting in the mid-90s, a Zen center in the mountains of New Mexico. And I'd been really studying books about meditation, books on Buddhism for 25 years now, 30 years now. It was around the time that I was in LA playing with Don Dokken that I got very interested in meditation. There was a certain unrest and a certain dissatisfaction with life, I'd say. And at the same time that I was on this rock star trip, living out this very interesting experience, I knew there was something else. And so, just a question about existence, a question about reality itself was calling. And so I was reading everything I could get my hands on, going to these temples, going into retreat, learning meditation. And it was around in the late 90s that I just knew that was the one thing I felt I had to dedicate some time to. So I left music completely, got rid of most of my instruments, sold and gave away a bunch of guitars, and went into solitude and silence. Not total solitude. I was in a Zen center, living with the monks and, living a monk's life. And just that was kind of like, okay, I'm done with music. I'm done with normal way of life. I just want to be in silence. I just want to really examine the mind. I want to examine consciousness, reality. and then little by little, music started seeping back in, so that I was going to New York and working on some different albums. And people were calling me to produce music with them. I got really interested in flamenco guitar, interestingly, and even went to Spain for a while to study. So this was also kind of I really felt like I was devoted to this way of walking the meditative life, devoting time to Buddhist practice and Buddhist study. But I also had this little fling with flamenco music, flamenco guitar. Went to Spain and then ended up living in Mexico for a while, where I got to sort of explore that, playing with different groups.
And you, if you don't mind me interrupting, you met your wife.
My now ex-wife, I was married in Mexico, had a son, a really wonderful son who's now 18, and an incredible, I'll have to say, I'm passing the torch to him because he's really a great guitarist.
Tell us the quick story that you told me a while back about you gave him that Stratocaster that Jeff Tweedy, our friend Jeff Tweedy, you gave that Stratocaster that's a kit guitar that I think that you had with you and John Norum when you went to Eddie Van Halen's house.
Oh yeah, it's a custom built guitar by a guy named Bill Gibbets, who's an amazing guitar builder. Right. And that was my main instrument throughout all those years. And so I passed that along to Donovan, my son.
But you had that with you. Tell us a story about you and John taking some amps or something.
You remember that? Okay, so that was a treat. We got to go hang out with Eddie at his house at the studio where they had recorded a lot of the records, 5150 Studio, I think it's called. Wow. And so we hung out with Eddie for a couple hours. He played that guitar, sounded exactly like him, Wow. We played a little bit together, and mostly I just wanted to hear him play and listen to his stories.
But now your son Donovan owns that guitar.
I know, and it's an amazing instrument. And, a little bit of Eddie's mojo in it.
Yeah, man. Okay, cool.
Good story.
Wow.
Of these stories, sometimes. What an incredible experience that was. And of course, Eddie was, one of the great pioneers, great musicians of all time.
Mm-hmm.
So now we're jumping forward, fast forwarding to life in Mexico. I started doing these gatherings of people with just listening to deep sounds. I had been collecting these Tibetan singing bowls and different instruments from all over the world, from India. People had been in yoga groups, had been asking if I would lead, sound meditations or singing mantras and things. So we started doing these circles that were like ceremonies of listening deeply to all kinds of sacred sounds, which could produce a very deep, transcendent experiences in altered states just through the sound itself.
Wow.
That took on a whole new life. And then I just felt, okay, this is what I'm doing now. There were a couple little excursions from that, like going on tour with Alejandro Escovedo, which was in 2012. About 6 months I went on the road with him.
Wow.
And that was
work.
We got to Europe. Yeah. It was kind of sticking my foot back in the water. They called me. I was living in Mexico. They called me and I said, I don't even have any electric guitars right now or amps. And they said, well, we can get that stuff for you, just fly to Austin and we need a guitar player for this tour. We're going to go to Europe. We're going to be on, Jay Leno, Jimmy Fallon shows. So
amazing.
Wow.
Yeah, that was fun. Very straight ahead, very rootsy rock.
Yeah.
stuff. I've been friends with Alejandro from way back. Really a good guy, gentleman.
Great. He's a great guy and has always been so sweet. Yeah.
So on these occasions when you dip your toe back into the music world, do you find that you've missed it, or are you reminded of why you left it?
I'd say both.
Wow.
There was something. It had been such a long time that I stood on stage with an electric guitar with a wall of sound behind us. You know, it's a different kind of energetic expression, and a lot of fun to a point. And then I also found that I hit the limit very quickly of what I was feeling or wanting to express. And I think to play that kind of music, there was a sort of a punk rock ethos in what Alejandro is doing too. I mean, he's a wonderful songwriter, but he likes to get on stage and crank it up like the Stooges, you know.
Yeah,
which was,
he's from that era. He's from that whole.
That's his background.
Yeah, his background is that loud MC5 kind of a vibe, you know.
But he's the real deal when it comes to that.
Yeah,
I sometimes felt a little bit out of my element because I even after a show one time I told him, you know, I don't know if I have the right kind of feeling of, I don't know, it's not anger or just, you know, I feel a little bit maybe too peaceful to be playing this music.
Yeah, he wants to.
I can see that.
He wants to set off fireworkers and, you know, black cats and Roman candles, and you're like, hey man, yeah, I understand.
And I don't drink or anything, and I really. Yeah. Well, he also doesn't drink because he and Bobby, the bass player, were recovering addicts.
Yeah.
So made that tour really possible is that those guys were not at all about drinking or drugs. And in fact, we would look for the local Whole Foods to score our kale and quinoa, you know.
Yeah. Well, and you know, you probably helped them. You probably helped them dearly. If they're recovering and you're sober, then they were probably hanging with you, trying to if I hang with Billy, I'm not gonna, you know, fall off.
Yeah. Are you
we support each other in that, you know?
Yeah, that's good.
I never was an addict, but I had quit, you know, using any kind of substances long ago. And, so it was kind of nice to be on a healthy tour.
Right. So
you're talking about Bobby Daniel, right?
Daniel, yeah.
Yeah, great guy. Yeah.
Another really solid bass player, really, really good guy. Yeah.
Yeah, great guy.
Yeah.
Wow. Yeah, I know Bobby. I've known him for quite a few years. I actually met him through Chris Gates.
Chris,
awesome.
yes.
Yeah.
No, that was a good band too. It was very straight ahead, very simple music, but there's something to playing. And this goes back to, you know, I started to appreciate it does take a certain skill to play very simple, even 3-chord songs with the right feeling, you know, and that's what I don't think we quite had a grasp of in the Watchtower days. It felt like we wanted to fill it up with a lot of complexity and a lot of notes, but it wasn't until later that I really appreciated, you know, what it is about the Rolling Stones, or, you know, there's really something to playing it right, 3 chords, 4/4 beat, and doing it right. It's almost more of a challenge because when I stepped into Alejandro's band, I kind of regained some of my chops on electric guitar, but I had to figure out, okay, how do I play within this context and make it meaningful, say something that, you know, is coming from me, a genuine expression, but, you know, there's not a lot of room for really fast shredding kind of guitar.
Right.
And so it's almost trickier to play a very simple.
Well, the songs are not calling for that.
Not at all. And it sounds absurd if I tried to do that. So when you have to leave some space, when you have to just say something with a few words, a few notes, you better make it, you know, make it mean something.
Yeah, the people that like to play fast and busy all the time, they don't understand how hard it is to play slow with lots of negative space.
Mm-hmm. It's a good way to say it.
Yeah, and it can become challenging and enlightening by leaving these giant gaping holes in the middle of your song map.
And that's an important part of music.
Yeah. Is what notes are not being played? Yes.
Contrasts.
Yeah.
Playing the right notes in the right way. And that's what I think it comes with maturity. And maybe when you're young, you stretch out and you feel the boundaries. You play the most complex thing you can think of. You really find out what your limitations are in that way. And then with maturity, you don't have the need to really fill up the space like that. And now, coming back to what I'm doing now, I would say that at times it's felt like, so I released several albums under the name The Heart is Awake. And a lot of that music is just droning on one note, one texture, but evolving soundscapes. And so sometimes I felt like within the one note is all the notes. And this may sound kind of abstract or hard to grasp. But
wait, it sounds like you're describing Watchtower. Abstract, hard to grasp.
Yeah, I've come back to that whole different
That's
form.
right.
But one thing that I explored a lot was overtone singing, where you sing one tone, like the Tuvan singers or the Tibetan monks do, where you actually produce two or more notes with one voice. And so what you're doing is filtering the harmonics of one note. So within every vibration, all the vibrations, all the octaves, and the other divisions of sound are present. But you can filter with the voice, you can filter it into these overtones, these harmonics. It's quite extraordinary. So this gets a little bit more into maybe the metaphysical aspects of sound and vibration.
So just real quick, is that sometimes, or is it exactly what they mean when they say throat singing?
Throat singing is a form of creating a low octave, and like the Tibetan monks do, and some death metal singers do too, right?
They do. They do.
Yeah. So you can get very low octave vibration, but I'm also talking about the harmonics that are produced when you shape the mouth, the tongue, the lips.
Yeah. Soft palate, hard palate, where your tongue is, how you're holding your jaw.
You resonate in the head, and you can create these higher harmonics, which you start to realize exist in all sound. And we're hearing them in a very subtle way. But when you filter them out in the way that I'm talking about, it becomes, really interesting to hear. You can sing two notes at once, and then you tune into something a little bit more transcendent with sound. And so within the one sound, all the sounds are included. And I think this is kind of the holographic image of the universe. So within every molecule is the entire universe.
Without computers.
Without computers. This is the way reality actually is, but we usually don't see it that way.
You are correct.
Unless you influence certain psychedelics or you're in a deep state of meditation, it's possible to have a certain glimpse of other levels of reality.
Sure.
I just consider that hallucination, but this is a hallucination too, isn't it?
Right. On the Talk Louder podcast.
Yes.
We're all hallucinating here. I would call this your new music. This is your new music. You're still a musician. Whether you have an instrument in your hands or not.
Yeah, now the instruments, and I do use guitar still sometimes.
Yeah.
Things like lap steel or 12 strings tuned to odd tunings. But, a lot of it comes from a music that I've always been in love with. I don't know if you remember in the Watchtower days, whenever I would hear Indian classical music, sitar, exotic sounds of the Eastern music.
I might even remember you sort of like modding your guitar just for fun, sticking things under the strings to get it to sound that way sometimes.
Oh yeah.
Just messing around. I don't think you ever recorded anything or took it anywhere, but it was just for your own subjective sort of experiment. And you were a kid too, so it was kind of early.
Yeah.
It's interesting, your story, Billy, because you and your brothers, in my fantastical brain, are very, very talented. So, where do you think that all of this is coming from? Are your brothers spiritual in some of the same ways you are? Because they're incredibly talented, and if they're not using it in any way to make the world a better place, shame on them. I'm kidding. I'm not angry. I'm just saying you guys are so talented. I'm just putting a lot of gas in the tank. I'm blowing hot air up all of y'all's asses because I think that your brothers are talented just as you are. Are they doing anything with it?
Chris has been continuing to record a lot of music.
Awesome.
Jason doesn't play as much,
okay.
But I can't speak about their spiritual life, but I'm sure everyone has some kind of sense of the spiritual.
Oh yeah.
realm, but I think I'm the only one who's really gone off to dedicate a large part of my life to that. And to the point that I almost left normal life entirely just to become a monk and devote all my time to meditation. And
I respect you.
I respect.
Yeah, thank you. And a lot of people are gonna be with us and respect you as well.
I think a lot of people, obviously, a lot of people already respect you as a musician, and I think you've been very open with us today. And I think a lot of our viewers and listeners are going to get a glimpse inside of Billy White today, and I think they're going to appreciate it. You're kind of hard to get a hold of. I don't know if we'd have you on the show if it wasn't for Jason being your bandmate. So I know for a fact there are a lot of people that are going to be very interested in this episode because they're Billy White fans, they're Watchtower fans, and I know that you're not the kind of guy that does a lot of these types of shows or whatever. You're fairly private. So we do appreciate you being with us today and sharing so much. It was nice to get to know you beyond the music.
It was a real treat. And it took Jason a few tries to convince me.
Oh, I know.
But I've enjoyed it. Very good questions.
Awesome. Do you have a website? Do you have a website? You have a Bandcamp account? People can just Google you. I mean, you exist.
Oh yeah.
Tell us how people can look into what you have going on.
People can go to theheartisawake.com and also on the social media, Instagram, Facebook places, although I'm not so good at keeping up on that always. And then on Bandcamp, The Heart is Awake I think I have 8 or 9 albums out now.
Unreal.
It's very meditative, very ambient, sometimes experimental and strange music. I think people might find it very interesting, but it's pretty far away from, the music we were making in our high school days, Jason.
But I'm going to bring this up again. Very progressive.
Yeah, I think it's something. I mean, for people who are fans of Brian Eno, Steve Roach, ambient music, they'll really, I think, relate to it. There's also an amazing band that originally was out of Texas called Stars of the Lid. That's quite brilliant. I think they're now in Europe, but they were based in Texas for a while. So there were some bands doing pretty far out experimental, ambient, cinematic types of music. And I've been doing more of that, working towards film music. And I've had some of the Heart is Awake music is in some shows. And,
awesome.
Soon more to come. So some of this music is quite cinematic, it's a journey. It's a journey the realms of consciousness and altered states of consciousness, I think, at times.
Well, if it's not a journey, I don't want to hear it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The Heart is Awake. Everyone can look that up and find Billy White's latest music at The Heart is Awake. Billy, so nice of you to join us today, man. A real pleasure getting to know you. I'm glad we finally got introduced by way of Jason. It was great talking to you. I'm going to go ahead and thank you now on behalf of all my Watchtower friends for the great album that is Energetic Disassembly. I hear about it all the time to this day. People still hold it up as like a masterpiece. So congratulations to both of you, and thanks for being on the show today. On behalf of my co-host, Jason McMaster, I'm Metal Dave Glessner, along with our very special guest today, the ever gracious Billy White on the Talk Louder podcast.